Hey guys, in today's video, I'm going to show you how to patch a bunch of small holes in drywall. So let's hit the road. All right, I am getting set up. I just arrived at the property, and as you can see, I just had some work done where a team needed access to the attic, so they cut out little 2-inch holes. And please excuse the sweat. It's summer in Arizona, so I just cranked down the AC in here. It's gonna be a little bit toasty for a bit, but I am gonna show you guys how to patch these little holes. And the team was actually nice enough to leave me the cutouts. So that should make it a lot easier. If you don't have that, you're gonna need to go to Home Depot or Lowe's, grab a piece of 2x2 drywall so that you have extra for the patching process. So I'm gonna get set up here with the mud and the tape and the trowel that I need to make sure that we can do this job successfully. So one of the first steps in the process is you need something hard, like a thin piece of wood that is gonna allow you to be the backer and slide it inside the hole. And I'm gonna have to make it kind of small here so that we have about 1 inch or 2 on either side, and it's a tight hole. So I wanna make sure that I can get this in, and then we'll screw the piece of drywall that we're patching right into that so there's some rigidity and holds its shape. So the next thing I'm gonna do here is take this piece of wood that I just cut and slide it into the hole so that that will be the backing for where I can screw that piece of replacement drywall back into. So I'm gonna try to put a screw on either side and then a screw right through the middle of the patch. So it should be 3 screws on each of these holes. If you're working with a bigger piece of missing drywall, it could be a dozen different screws around the perimeter of it, but in this case, it's a small hole. And then once that's done, then I can work on putting some drywall tape and some mud around this. And in theory, it's a pretty easy process. So let's get started on doing the dirty work. All right, first one done. And take a look here. There's a little crack in the wood. That does not matter. It's still gonna be as rigid as it would be without the crack. So don't worry about that. And then also take a look. I sunk the screws a couple millimeters into the drywall. And what that allows you to do is put the mud over a lot easier. And if you've ever seen a ceiling that has a bunch of kind of little screw holes sticking out, it's not very aesthetic. So what this will allow you to do is have a very flush finish, and you won't even know, hopefully, that there had been a patch there in the first place. So now I can take the little circle, screw it right back into here, and then again, we can get work started with the mud. All right, part 1 is done. 1 of 8, I should add. They cut about 8 holes in the ceiling. So now I need to repeat that process 7 more times. And again, then we can get started with phase 2, which is taping and mudding. And then there's a phase 3 and a phase 4, sanding and painting. So in theory, not a super challenging process, but there are steps you want to follow to be successful. We've just done the backing and the patch, and then we're gonna move to taping and mudding, sanding, painting. So let's keep going. One quick tip I wanted to add: once you have your backing board screwed in, keep in mind it may only be held in place by a couple of screws. Again, depending on the size of the hole that you're working on. But when you go to screw in your replacement piece of drywall, keep in mind, don't put too much pressure. You don't want to jam the drill through this backing board because it'll pop out these screws and it'll make it look even worse. It'll make your job harder. So you just want to give it a couple good taps with the drill and make sure that it's gently secured into the backing board. Otherwise, it'll get lost in the ceiling or fall down the wall. I've had that happen before. So this is a game of finesse when you're doing drywall, because again, it's not steel, it's not wood. This gypsum board, drywall is not the hardest substance on earth. So you want to be careful with how you're screwing these things together. I want to show you guys something real quick on this hole. What you'll notice is there's actually a stud right here, and there's actually some missing insulation, so that's another story. But when you hit a stud in drywall repair, that's kind of like winning a little lottery, because you instantly have your backing board in here. And just so it wouldn't be kind of wavy or wobbly in here, I did put another piece. So we got wood on both sides. And again, I'm gonna have to adjust my screw because I can't screw straight through the middle. I have to screw here or both. So keep that in mind when you encounter a stud. All right, I got all these done, 8 of them, ready to go. 2 up there, and then 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now what I'm doing is, because I have to do so many of these, I need to coat the area in a square. So I'm using drywall tape. Some of these professionals are so fast at it, they can rip it and tear it and put it up there super fast. I'm not that fast at it. And to make my life easier, I'm gonna cut out a ton of about 4-inch strips so that I can put 4 inches on the top side, bottom, left and right. And basically, you wanna cover with mud first, and then tape after that on top of it, and then mud again. And I'll show you how to do it. But in the interest of being able to crank through this quickly, because I have so many patches to do, I'm gonna do kind of an assembly line here. I did all the patchwork. Now I'm gonna do all the taping and mudding, sanding. So it's kind of a process. And again, you wanna follow these steps to be successful. Now, next to my coffee, I have the mud, all-purpose sheetrock joint compound. So I picked this up, it's like $6-7 at Home Depot. You can get the bigger size, that's a couple gallons, I think, for $10, and then you can get like a 5-gallon one as well if you want, for probably $20-30. So this stuff's pretty cheap, and this should be plenty for our purposes today. And I got my taping knife here, ready to go. Again, this one might be a little bit big to fit inside here, but I have a couple smaller ones as well. So you're just gonna load up your taping knife and then start throwing mud onto the wall over this patch. So let's get going. So one quick tip, if taping intimidates you, you're not very good at it, you're not sure where to place the tape, etc., you can actually measure out the area that you need to patch. And then I've just been making these little pre-made squares with the pieces that I pre-cut. And then once the mud is there, I can just put it right over the patch, and it saves me a little bit of time versus trying to cut each piece as I'm going. So this is a very similar concept to those ready-made patch kits that they sell at hardware stores. But if you do this, it's gonna save you a bunch of money because those things are way overpriced. So try that out. All right, I got the taping and mudding done. Let's take a look at my work. I have 8 holes ready to be sanded and painted. First, actually, I have to let this dry. And one thing to keep in mind is if you're not a professional who does this for 40, 50, 60 hours a week, it could take a couple iterations on figuring out how much mud you need. So don't be afraid to go back over it so that the finished product is as clean and flush to the wall as possible. If you need to go back 2 or 3 times and put some extra mud and some extra tape and make sure that it's gonna reveal a perfect patch underneath when we're all done, then don't try to rush through it. Take your time. Again, it is a finesse job. It is a bit of an art, or it's definitely an art, I should say. These guys are masters, the drywall repair crews. So keep in mind it's gonna take some time. And I'm gonna let this dry now, and then we'll be back to sand and paint. So I took my lunch break, and now I'm ready to get back at it. As you can see up above me, the patch has gone from that dark, wet mud to now that dried gray mud. And I'm ready to get started with my electric palm sander here to make quick work of sanding all 8 of these holes. And the goal is to make it look like there was never anything cut out of the ceiling. And I'm gonna be using this to get as flush as possible with the rest of the ceiling so we can have that crisp, clean look, and then finally bust out that white paint. So time to get started. All right, so here, I'm picking up a lot of the mud here, and so that limits the ability for the sandpaper to do its job. So I'm gonna flip this around so that I have fresh sandpaper, which will make it a lot faster. All right, so now we're good to go. I can hit the rest of these patches and get them done. So one thing to call out right here, if you see a little bit of a dark spot, that could mean a couple things. One, it could just mean that the mud is a little bit more dense in that area, or that it's still a little bit wet. And sometimes it depends on how it ends up sanding a little bit. So I touched it, it seems dry to the touch. So just something to remember, if it is still that dark gray, or if you're using that pink to white patch joint compound as well, if it's still bright pink in the middle, that means it's wet. Don't sand it yet, you gotta wait, because it's just gonna mess up all your sandpaper and you're gonna have to redo it anyway. So make sure that you give it enough time, maybe even wait till the next day to make sure everything for sure is dry. But in this case, we should be good to go. It feels really smooth. I think I sanded it well, so we can move on. One quick thing I want to call out, this tape that we put on along the edges, if you remember in that square pattern, you can kind of see the outline here, and it's not a big deal. If you see it pop out, all you need to do is sand a little bit more until it's all flush with the wall, and you just have that consistent feel from the existing wall, the mud that we just did, and then the wall again. And once you have achieved that look, you'll know that it's ready to paint. All right, I did 2 rounds of sanding. I am sufficiently covered in drywall dust. Make sure you're wearing a mask of some sort, a respirator, and some goggles. Drywall dust in the eyes and the lungs is not fun. And so as you can see here, I got clean sanding job done. And I did it twice because sometimes you're like, I don't know if it's as flush as I want it to be. So making sure that you get up on the ladder and check again, just to make sure that everything's done correctly, really helpful, because you don't want to start painting and then be like, shit, this is gonna look poor. So really make sure to take the time to do it right on the front side so that you're not having to redo work later. So now all I'm gonna do, take a dry towel and then get off all the drywall dust, because you don't want that to be mixed in with the paint. It makes the surface unclean and really tough to paint on. So this drywall dust gets everywhere. So I'm gonna go around, and you can see up on the gray wall here, the drywall dust is there. So I gotta go clean everything. And then I can finally do the easiest part of the project, which is just throwing a coat of paint over it, and then we can call it a day. All right, I got everything wiped down. I am ready to paint. I am using a roller for smooth surfaces, because obviously the wall is smooth, and I wanna not use a brush, because a brush can get those obviously brush lines, and then you can easily spot a drywall patch job if you use a brush. So I wanna match the texture as well when you're doing a drywall repair, and the easiest way is to use a little roller to make sure that we get that smooth finish when we're painting. So I'm gonna hop up on the ladder, and you know the drill. Forgot to mention this paint kind of sucks, so it's gonna take me like 3 or 4 coats to finish this up. So it'd be easier if I was patching on a color like this, but if you're using white paint, it's harder to cover that mud up. So keep that in mind when you're getting to this final stage that's supposed to be easy, but it takes a little bit of effort. But again, it's all about that final product, so it's gonna be worth it. All right, guys, I am just finishing up. As you can see right about there, just waiting on the paint to dry. Don't ask me how many coats it took because it was a huge pain in the ass. But that's what happens when you're painting on a white ceiling. So I'm really excited with how it came out. It looks flush, as well as all the other holes that I covered. They looked really good as well. So I'm just gonna clean up. I'm cleaning up all the floors. I'm mopping the floors with all the drywall dust, and I'm just gonna do a final look to make sure everything came out as well as I wanted it to. And I hope your drywall patch project goes as smoothly as mine did. Until the next DIY video, we'll see you later.